I have a friend who moved to the same state as me who doesn't know a lot of people here, and he frequently wants to hang out, but only when he gets to cook for me because he loves cooking. But his cooking is really bad, and I feel bad constantly avoiding him because he really needs a friend. Posted by you/throwaway452896 about 6 months ago, I, 30F, moved across the country to a new state where I have a lot of friends and family. I posted about my move on Facebook, and Michael, 32M, a Facebook friend and acquaintance I had met once or twice through other friends, reached out to tell me he happened to be moving to the same city and asked if I would want to get together sometime. I agreed, and after we had both moved and settled, we met up. We became friendly and started hanging out semi-regularly. I have a lot of friends and family in the state. As I mentioned, work also keeps me very busy, so I don't have a ton of free time. Michael moved here because he recently got a divorce. He has an old friend, 30M, who owns a house here, who agreed to rent him a room. They also have a third roommate, 30M. Michael does not have a job, so he has a lot of free time, and he is usually the one to initiate hangouts. So, Michael loves to cook. The very first time we got together, he came to my place and cooked dinner. The meal was okay, although it was dairy-based, and I really don't eat dairy at all, so I felt pretty sick afterward. I was also pretty specific about a certain ingredient that I don't really like, but he was insistent that he needed to use it for the dish. Whatever, no biggie. However, as time went on, every time Michael would invite me to hang out, he wanted to cook. Either he wanted to come to my place and cook, or he wanted me to come over and he would cook for me and the roommates and their significant others. Each time I ate Michael's cooking, I began to think more and more that I really just could not stand it. The first time he cooked for me and his roommates, I noticed that everyone at the table was silent when eating, and no one else commented on the food until he would eagerly ask, "How was it?" and get some sort of lackluster praise. He did this at least 3 times during the meal. Probably the worst was the time no one could finish their plate and everyone made excuses for why they were just so full they couldn't finish the meal. After that incident, whenever Michael would invite me to hang out, I would try suggesting other activities. We live in a place that is full of fun, socially distanced outdoor activities, so I would frequently suggest those things. He would always decline and try to convince me to come to his place so that he could cook. Last night, I got a message from Michael that he had a huge falling out with his roommate, and he was very upset. I texted with him for a while, trying to calm him down and give him some advice about how to handle the situation. He was so upset that eventually I asked if he wanted to come over for a beer so that he could get out of the house and clear his head. He asked if I had already eaten, and I said that I had. It was almost 8 o'clock by that point, and he asked if he could come over today, instead. I said sure. He replied with, "Great, I'll stop at the store and cook so-and-so dish for us." I told him, "Actually, I am on a diet and I couldn't eat that," but he was welcome to come over for drinks and some video games. He just kept pushing, asking about my diet and what I could eat, and finally suggested something that I would have no reason to say no to. This morning, when I woke up, I was so dreading his meal that I texted him that I forgot I had made plans this evening. I told him I'd be home around 8 o'clock, too late for dinner, and he was still welcome to come over then, or we could try for another night. I don't really know what to do about this guy. I feel bad because he hardly knows anyone here, and now it looks like he's on bad terms with his roommates. And I know he probably really needs a friend right now, but he's so insistent on feeding me every single time we get together. I think if I tell him that I can't stand his cooking, it will honestly be more hurtful than just fading out of his life. /relevant comments. Commenter, dude, just tell him the truth. If it's the end of the friendship because of his bruised ego, so be it. You're supposed to enjoy time with your friends. Life is too short to suffer through his meals. Commenter 2, even without the awful food, I'd really have my backup about someone that was so insistent on feeding me all the time. It's weird and kind of overstepping, especially when you've tried to say no. Update 2 weeks later. Update, 2 weeks later, so, my post didn't get a ton of attention, but I still felt like it deserved an update. After posting and thinking about things, I realized that it wasn't just about the cooking. I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but I really didn't care to be friends with Michael anymore. He never wanted to do anything I suggested, and that really bothered me. I felt like our entire friendship was just about me making time to do what he enjoyed, cooking for us, even though I got nothing out of it at all. Then one night, around midnight, I got a text from Michael saying that he was worried about me. When I asked why, he replied with, "You used to be my best friend, but now you just ignore me." There were a bunch of typos, so I could tell he had been drinking. I told him I had been busy, and also pointed out that I had actually invited him to do a lot of things with me, but he always turned down my invites. He acknowledged that was true, apologized, and said that in the future, if I asked him to do things I enjoy, he'd be sure to accept. 3 days later, he messaged me again asking when I was free to hang out. I replied with, "What do you have in mind?" I wanted to hear what he wanted to do before committing to hanging out. He kept pushing, just saying he'd like to see me, and he'd be available anytime I was free. I finally gave him a time frame, to which he replied he'd love to come over and cook for us. That was just the final straw. So, I sent him the following message: "Hey, so to be honest, you're a nice person, but I'm not interested in hanging out tonight or at all. The time that we have spent together has made me realize that we don't actually have much in common, and when you weren't into any of the stuff I enjoy doing, I lost interest in the friendship. Combined with the fact that I still have so much pain from my accident, it just seems like too much effort. No hard feelings. I really do wish you the best." I blocked him after that. Maybe I'm a jerk for the way that I handled the situation, but life feels too short to waste so much time doing what other people want. I never advocate for myself and always end up in these types of draining, one-sided friendships, so I feel proud of what I said and relieved to be moving past this situation. Top/relevant comments. Commenter: I totally understand why this happened. Unfortunately, Michael probably thinks he's trying hard to be social and puts effort into his friendships, so he just can't understand why he doesn't get the same effort back. He's probably lonely, and you can find a lot of lonely people complain about this, but he's awkward and has a hard time reading or understanding your cues, or I dare say caring about your cues and messages about what you do and don't want to do. It's hard to be friends with someone like that, and to be honest, Michael probably doesn't have a lot of friends. Ops response: very insightful. I mentioned at the end of my post that I end up in a lot of friendships like this. I have sympathy for people like this, and I usually endure the friendship because I feel for them, but honestly, I think I'm at a point in my life where I'm just over being that nice person. Friendship needs to go both ways, and I'm tired of giving so much time to people who I get no enjoyment from being with. You/recycle dare: I wanted to hear what he wanted to do before committing to hanging out. He kept pushing, just saying he'd like to see me, and he'd be available anytime I was free. He was trying to act on your previous feedback and wanted you to suggest something you wanted to do before he suggested anything. You forced his hand by pushing him to suggest something and blew up at him when he offered the one thing he thought he was good at that would help you out, which you've never once told him you didn't enjoy, but continue to do. Ops response: I didn't want to put seemingly unnecessary detail in my post. I have invited Michael to go hiking at least 4 times. I have also invited him to go ice skating, snow tubing, skiing, driving in the mountains, and even on a weekend trip to a nearby state. He has declined every single invite, instead asking me to come over and try his cooking or watch TV. Edit to add: I even offered to pay for him on the more expensive activities, even though he doesn't need me to, as an incentive to get him to join. Commenter 2: those are all super physical activities, and he sounds like more of a homebody if he likes cooking and watching TV. I agree you probably weren't compatible as friends, but ghosting him, re-engaging with him, and then about facing and sending a "Dear John" all sounds a bit much, and you were never honest with him in any of it. I just really feel for the guy. Damn. Commenter 3: I mean, I like to cook, but I'm good at it, lol, and watch TV, and I would never want to do any of those activities. Not even if someone else paid. Not even if someone paid me to do it, lol. But I know this, and I avoid having a good friend status with anyone because I don't want to socialize the way other people do. I've pretty much done the same thing before with a friend. Sent her a message telling her that while I liked her, I didn't really enjoy when we hung out and didn't want to anymore. Sounds like a breakup, and in a way I guess it is, lol. Ops response: yeah, I'm getting a lot of hate for it, but I just don't see why I should continue to be friends with someone I don't like hanging out with. We don't enjoy doing the same things. I tried to drift away slowly, and he wouldn't have it, so I had to treat it like a breakup. Op adds an edit to her post: there are a lot of people defending Michael and calling me a horrible person. In my last post, I mentioned that he had a falling out with his roommates. They actually asked him to move out because he was being so disrespectful and aloof. I didn't include it in my post because I didn't want to be unfairly harsh. Now I see that the way I described Michael made people sympathize with him, and that's honestly given me more food for thought than anything. I couldn't even describe how awful he was to a bunch of internet strangers without feeling bad. A lot of people are also just making blind assumptions about him, and every single one is so far from reality. I guess we should all take Reddit posts with a grain of salt. Second update 1 week later. Second update, 1 week later, I got a lot of hate on my last post here, and at first I couldn't really understand why. One person who continued to comment angrily was you/recycle dare, so I actually ended up messaging him privately to ask why he thought I was such a villain. It turned out to be a really productive conversation. I gave him some more details about the situation and really ended up realizing that the issue was deeper than I made it out to be. I had left some details out of my original post, thinking that they were not necessarily relevant, only to realize that they were the true root of the problem. Thanks to you /recycledair for letting me get stuff off of my chest and encouraging me to make another post. So, I will provide those details, and surprisingly, even to me, new events have occurred, and I will share those as well. When Michael and I first moved to the state we live in, we were both romantically interested in one another. We had been online friends for a while, having only met once briefly in real life, and I think we expected more to develop between us when we moved to the same city. I did not mention this at all in my post because after spending some time together, I realized that I didn't feel that way toward him anymore. I told him that upfront, and we agreed to continue to be friends. Initially, one of the biggest reasons that we connected was over our shared love of outdoor activities. So, for everyone guessing that Michael was unable to or disinterested in the hikes and trips I planned, that just wasn't true. He's very physically fit, and early on he expressed a huge interest in these activities. However, when he wanted to hang out, he always wanted to hang out at one of our houses, and almost always this led to us being in situations where he would want to lay on the couch and gradually lead into trying to cuddle with me. So, while I disliked his cooking, I guess that really I just felt like he was never respectful of the boundary that I set when I told him I only wanted to be friends. I was channeling my anger into his mediocre food. I tried hard to maintain a friendship by inviting him to do the things he had already told me that he loved, but he never wanted to, and this led me to feel like he was disingenuous. This ultimately ended with me telling him off and blocking him. Many people read what I did and saw it as cruel, but I felt like this person did not respect me, and I didn't feel like what I did was wrong. However, there's more. The day after I made the post, I came home from work and found a stuffed animal on my doorstep with an apology note. It just said, "Sorry for being a bad friend." I thought about it for a couple of days and decided that maybe I had been overly harsh. I unblocked Michael, and I thanked him for the stuffed animal. Then I apologized for blocking him and told him basically what I said here, that I felt like he didn't respect my boundaries and he didn't really value my friendship because he never wanted to do anything that I suggested. I expected him to be defensive, but he actually apologized profusely. He told me that the situation with his roommates had been deteriorating for the last 2 months, and he was physically and mentally exhausted, which is why he never wanted to do anything. Every time he declined my invites, he could feel that we were drifting apart as friends, but he was focusing on trying to manage the issues at home. One thing he apologized for was being unable to communicate to me what was going on at home. He also recognized that he had pushed my boundaries and tried to move things in a direction that was not platonic, and he apologized for that as well. In fact, he sent me a very long, seemingly heartfelt message that I really found touching. He told me that the day that I sent him that message and blocked him, he realized that between pushing away his one friend here and having such major problems with his roommates, he just did not want to stay in this city. The day he left the plush on my doorstep, he also packed a U-Haul and moved back home to his parents' house. So, in the last 2 days, we've both apologized a lot and sort of resumed our superficial meme sharing, internet long-distance friends relationship that we had for a year prior to both moving to the same state. He said he hopes that one day, when he's in a better place, we can meet up again and I can know him as the person he really is. Not that exciting, but I guess a happier ending than I expected. Thanks to everyone who /relevant comments. Commenter, it is amazing how introspective we need to get to reach the true heart of the problem. I'm glad you both did. Commenter 2, when I read your first post, just the part where you said that you had to tell him multiple times that you didn't like and wouldn't eat an ingredient he insisted had to be in his meal set the red flags waving. I figured it was just me because one of my hard boundaries is respecting my food choices or choice to not eat something, and if that had happened to me, I never would have eaten his cooking again or let him cook for me. I kept wondering why no one else thought that was a big deal, and I guess in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't, but to me, it jumped out as something super disrespectful. I respect your decision to not bring up his cooking, but if in the future you decide to, I think you should also address his rude dismissal and lack of respect for your choice not to eat certain foods.